half of the important messages, the top part is cut off. You're right.
And that's what's, so people are gonna go to the website, they're gonna look at it and say, I can't see the important message, it's missing. Like I can't even scroll up to it unless I zoom down to 75.
What I'm thinking is I might be able to get in there. You used to post the link, right?
Say that again, Alex?
Christina still needs to post the link, right?
Yeah, I'm just about to email it to her.
Yes. Ask her to delete one of the items listed on the main page, and I'm hoping it would shift.
Alex, what I need you to do is get her on the phone. You guys work it out. I'm emailing you both the link right now to the video.
Okay, no problem.
All right?
Okay, yeah.
All right, thanks.
Okay, bye.
Bye. Okay, Google. Oh, this is what it is. Sound check. Can you guys hear me? Great. Okay, Madam President, I believe we have everyone here.
Thank you, Mr. Markarian. Pardon me. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Board of Education meeting. The board has already met in executive session and saluted the flag at that time. With that, Mr. McLaughlin, could we please have a roll call?
Mr. Salmon,
Yes, here, sorry.
Ms. Shaver,
Here.
Ms. Beckman,
Here.
Mrs. White,
Here.
Mrs. Richmond,
Here.
Mrs. Korn,
Here.
Mrs. McCune,
Here.
Ms. Hira. I think we've lost her. I don't see her on the screen. Mrs. Gray,
Yes, are here, following Mr. Salmon this evening.
Madam President, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McLaughlin. This is a regular meeting of the Board of Education of Bernards Township. Notice the time, the place of this meeting was provided, and copies of that resolution were forwarded to the official newspapers as designated by the Board of Education and the Township Clerk. And a copy of the notice was posted on the bulletin board of the Board of Education offices in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act. Due to the public health emergency in the state of New Jersey as declared in Executive Order 103, the board will be suspending normal meeting procedures this evening and conducting a virtual meeting. Directions for accessing the virtual public meeting were posted on the district website, www.bernardsboe.com. The same directions were posted at our intended but unavailable meeting location. We very much welcome input from the public. Because this is a virtual meeting, public comment will be handled in one of three ways. Public comment method number 1, which is the preferred method, is the full video via Zoom. When you're ready to make a public comment, join the Board of Education meeting via the Zoom link posted on the district webpage. Please plan for your participation in the meeting by turning your camera and microphone on, dressing appropriately, maintaining a proper background setting for your camera's view, having a quiet space, muting the YouTube live stream of the Board of Education meeting when you are speaking so that there is no feedback with your participation in the Zoom meeting. You'll be placed in a queue and admitted to the meeting when it is your turn to make a public comment. Once you see that you're admitted to the Zoom call, it will be your turn to make your public comment. Please begin your public comment by stating your full name and address. After making your comment, please exit the Zoom meeting so that the next person waiting to make the public comment can be admitted. Public comment method 2, dial in via Zoom, which is voice only. When you're ready to make your public comment, join the Zoom meeting using the dial-in phone number and meeting ID posted on the district website. Plan for your participation in the meeting by having a quiet space, muting the YouTube live stream of the Board of Education meeting when you are speaking so that there is no feedback with your participation in the Zoom meeting. You'll be placed in a queue and admitted to the meeting when it is your turn to make public comment. Once you see that you are admitted to the Zoom call, it will be your turn to make the public comment. Please begin your public comment by stating your full name and address. After making your comment, please exit the Zoom meeting so that the next person waiting to make a public comment can be admitted. Public comment method 3, if the first 2 are unavailable or fail. Starting at 7 p.m., email your comment to btconnect@bernardsboe.com or text your comment to 908-292-3047. Use public comment as the email subject or the start of the text message. Indicate your first and last name and address. This is required for your public comment to be included. Whether you use method 1, 2, or 3 for public comment, please note that public comments are limited to a maximum of approximately 3 minutes if read aloud. Individuals are permitted a maximum of 1 public comment during public comment on agenda items and 1 public comment during public comment on non-agenda items. Public comments submitted via method 1 and 2 will be processed first, then comments submitted by method 3. An individual's comments made using method 1 or 2 will not also be read into the record through method 3. The Board of Education reserves the right to limit the length of time allotted for public comment. This evening, as in all past meetings that I can remember now, we are limiting that to 45 minutes for both agenda and non-agenda item public comment. No public comments will be accepted before 7 p.m. or after item 19, the board forum item on the agenda. Please understand public comment portions of our agendas are not structured as question and answer sessions, but rather they are offered as an opportunity to share your thoughts with the board. The board may or may not respond to public comments. Any board responses to public comments will generally be addressed during board forum or during committee reports. However, all comments are considered and will be investigated and addressed as appropriate. Please be courteous and mindful of the rights of others when providing comments. Comments may not be abusive, obscene, threatening, or irrelevant. Please understand that students and employees have specific legal and privacy protections. The board is not permitted to respond in public to comments about students and employees. Please also understand that the board is not responsible for the content of comments made by members of the public. Members of the public are cautioned that they are commenting at their own risk, and any personally directed statements they make may subject them to legal liability to the affected individual. With that, I think we are ready for our student representative, Juliet. Welcome. Good evening.
Thank you. Hello. In the past 2 weeks, Ridge seniors have passed a major milestone, and there now remains less than 100 days until graduation. Looking ahead as a senior, I'm excited for graduation, even as I know I will miss Ridge. Looking further ahead, students have recently brought up concerns to me about how the Ridge music programs will be affected by the shift of the master schedule to a drop schedule, which could decrease music participation. In terms of sports, I'm happy to announce that in the past 2 weeks as well, the January and February athletes of the month were honored from basketball, fencing, swim, hockey, cheer, and track and field. Ridge athletics continually make the entire Ridge community proud, so such honors are well warranted. Also in the past week, Dr. Lazovic announced to the Ridge students and staff that from this year on, all gowns worn at Ridge graduation will be green regardless of gender. Additionally, following up with a point of discussion from last week, this past weekend, Ridge Forensics was able to host an in-person award ceremony for the New Jersey Speech and Debate League's States Tournament, and I'm happy to report that Ridge won first place at that tournament. Thank you again for having me.
Does anyone have any questions for Juliet? Thanks for your report and as always for joining us. Remember, you're not required to stay, but you're most welcome to do so. And with that, we are up to our board presentation, the William N. STEM presentation.
Yes. Thank you, Madam President. I just wanted to reach out and thank our William N. Staff. In particular, I wanted to thank our students and our staff members that put this presentation together for us. Our students are listed on the agenda, and our staff member, Mr. Vivekanand, is going to be present on video here momentarily. So I'm going to see if I can't get this shared screen going for you. We're going to try to make this presentation tonight virtually. The students have made a recording to share with you. And reason that we like to do this is to periodically share some great things that are going on in our schools. In the past, we've had guests come to Board of Education meetings in person and share how some things are going. And we decided that we could still make this happen by sharing some recordings of student presentations. So that's what we're going to try tonight. And I will share screen here and see if we can't make this happen. Just one moment.
Excuse me, is the sound on? Because we can't hear, Nick. I don't know if you're hearing it.
Did anyone else hear this? Because I cannot. Okay, just making sure I'm not the only one.
You guys are not able to hear it? Okay.
I could hear it. I could hear it completely. Am I the only one?
All right, let me give it one more try here. Hang on a second.
Unfortunately, I don't think we're any better off because we can see that his mouth is moving. Anyone else hear it?
I can hear it. I don't know how I'm the only one.
I can hear it as well. This past time I was able to hear it.
I can't hear anything.
I could hear it.
Okay.
We'll try one more time. I'm hearing mixed reactions on who can hear it and who can't, so we're going to give it one more shot.
Is there anyone who's on a Mac versus a PC? Could it be a platform issue?
I'm on a Mac.
I'm on a Mac, so that rules that out.
I'm in a Mac as well.
Yeah, so that doesn't explain it.
All right, we'll give it one more shot.
Still no sound for me.
Same, no sound.
Is anyone else watching the YouTube video? Because you can't see the kid presenting. It's like one of our boxes blocks him. It's weird.
That's a teacher.
Right, but I can't see the teacher. I see Karen right now on the YouTube video.
Okay, so we're going to punt. I will let you know that we did practice this this afternoon and it was working fine. So I can't explain why you're getting a mixed result of some folks being able to hear and some folks not being able to hear. So my apologies.
Right, I see Karen right now.
So my apologies about that. What we'll do is we'll take the presentation and we will post it to our district website. We will also include the YouTube video link in the Board of Ed minutes so that they are embedded. And when you open the minutes, folks will be able to view the presentation that way. And we will also share it out through our website with a link as well. So my apologies. It was working fine in the dry run today, so can't quite explain what's going on this evening, but I do apologize, and we'll get that out to you separately from this evening's meeting so folks can see it.
Thank you, Mr. Markarian. So then we will move on to the second piece of the board presentation, which is the preliminary 2021-22 budget with Mr. Markarian and Mr. McLaughlin.
Thank you, Madam President. And I know Mr. McLaughlin's going to start, and I will wrap things up at the end. And you should have the ability to share screen now, Mr. McLaughlin. Let's hope this goes a little bit better.
Good evening and welcome to our annual preliminary review of the upcoming year's school budget, which would be the 2021-2022 school budget. Just for those who may be first timers for this meeting, we have two meetings generally. One, the preliminary school budget meeting, in which the board will later this evening review this budget for submission to the county office for their approval for public advertisement, and ultimately a public hearing at which the budget for the 2021-2022 school year would be adopted, and that would be at our first meeting in March, which I believe is on May 3rd. The time, place, and manner of which will be disclosed several weeks prior to that meeting and subsequent to the approval by the Executive County Superintendent of Schools for our discussion of that budget. That said, let me move right along. What we have here is a quick snapshot comparing the current year's budget, fiscal year 2021, to the proposed budget. You will see that we are looking at overall an increase of $3.4 million. Broken down as follows. We have a general operating expense increase, which are what everyone would think of as what goes on in and around the school. Everything from transportation and cleaning and utilities, right on down to instruction and supplies in the classroom, and everything in between, including support services such as guidance, child study team, nursing services, and of course the administration of all of these things. That said, there is a reduction in capital expenditures year over year proposed of just slightly under $250,000 at $227,000. And the federal expenses are expected to go up by just $356. We have to show it to you so the math ties out, obviously. And debt expenses are expected to go down $2,950. As we get into this presentation, I'll talk about each of these areas a little bit more and drill down into them. I believe this slide is probably going to be the most relevant for those who are numbers oriented in terms of what are the major changes in our budget in terms of budgeted expenses. So as I noted in the previous screen, $3.4 million increase year over year. Just over a shade over $1 million of that is salary increases driven predominantly and primarily by contractual increases with our collective bargaining units. The employee health benefits are up $1.7 million year over year. I'll talk about that a little bit more in an additional slide, but a significant component of that is really the state of New Jersey change in health benefit laws and its mandate and the additional costs that the districts are, and in particular our district is seeing as a result of their change in health benefit plans that we have been mandated to offer effective January 1 of this year. Support services, so things such as nursing, extraordinary and related services are things such as one-on-one aides, one-on-one nurses, occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech therapy. Overall, year over year, the drivers are really in these latter two categories, extraordinary and related, of the $59,000 plus almost $60,000 plus increase. And that really changes year to year based on the needs and the mix of our particular cohorts of students as they progress through the district's grades and where they are in their programs and their IEPs, in particular, individualized education programs, or plans, I should say. Professional services and telecom services are up just about $32,000. Little over half of that is for legal services, and the remainder is telecom services. We've seen an increase in telecom costs, especially in this last year with all of the increased use of technology that the last year has brought, and we anticipate that'll continue going forward. Pension and unemployment up just about 160,000 at 159,557. Of that, roughly $80,000, just about half, actually a little more than half, is actually related to unemployment, whereas unemployment has been a relatively low number in prior years because of the pandemic and because of both federal and state, and now continuing federal and state mandates to extend the term of unemployment. We are seeing increased unemployment costs to the district. So we have budgeted accordingly to accommodate those. Current capital outlay, as I indicated before, it's down just under $250,000. Really the big driver here is that through the current year, which is ending June 30th, the district had a 5-year, $1.2 million technology lease. And so the annual lease payment on that is reaching termination this year as of June 30th. And therefore, we no longer have that outlay for that expense in the upcoming year. Facilities, grounds, and maintenance is and has been for the past 20+ years outsourced by the district via competitive contracting to a third-party service provider. That third-party service provider, and in particular our locale, Bernards Township, has been unionized in the past several months, and we anticipate and have been advised, and I'll talk about it a little bit further in an additional slide, by our outside consulting firm to expect an increase, a net increase to the district of roughly $349,000 in cost because of the unionization. Primarily, I'll talk about what the drivers are of that when I get to it on the slide. Special education placements out of district are anticipated to go up about $297,000. Again, this fluctuates year to year depending upon the mix of students that we have that are classified and what their individual needs are at the point in time that we strike the budget or that we anticipate to be their needs within the next several months. So after consultation with special services and reviewing the cohorts of students in their current out of district placements, this is the anticipated cost for increase for next year. As I indicated, the serial bond debt that the district has for paying down its referendum expenses from back in the, primarily at this point from in the early 2000s, is down roughly $2,950. Overall, I'll talk about that a little bit more when we get to the revenue slide. And federal grants are expected to go up a drip, if you will, at $356. As again, the math doesn't tie out if I don't show you even the smallest amount, obviously. That said, one of the things that we're going to talk about, and I'll drill down and talk about this a little bit more in another minute or two, is the budgeted fund balance. The district, in addition to its various revenue sources, has always had varying degrees of reserve balance that it puts into its budget in order to balance its budget. This number, as I'll discuss in a minute, is significantly higher than in prior years. And the driver for that predominantly is that with the way that the past fiscal year that ended June 30th of 2020 ended, with a lot of the district being virtual from, or virtually, I should say, all of the district being virtual for instruction from the middle of March roughly until the end of June, there were certain types of services and costs that we realized savings on that are one-time expected savings. In particular, for example, to give people some sense of what those were, we renegotiated our trash agreements for those period of time, the pickup we had for trash, because obviously without students in cafeterias and students and staff in buildings, we needed significantly less. So in fact, we were able to reduce the trash output to one dumpster, if you can imagine that, for the entire district. So that saved us significant money there. Obviously, we did not have to have custodians in on a full-time basis for that period of time because we did not have the need to keep cleaning the classrooms every day. And that was something that we renegotiated with our third-party provider, and that saved us significant funds. And we were able to operate our buildings utilities on a unoccupied mode for most of that period of time. And that, of course, saves money. So those are some major things to think about in terms of why that was a unique scenario. I'll talk a little bit more about the ramifications of this in a few minutes. So here's a budget revenue comparison from year to year. And you can see right up at the top, the 4.7 million budgeted fund balance I was talking about. There is a footnote that I'd like to bring to your attention here and down here with state aid, because this state aid number here for the current year, 3,459,000, was actually almost $431,000 less when we approved this budget for the current year, which we did in May of last year. And the reason for that is that the state of New Jersey did not approve its budget for state aid until the end of July. And at which point they told us that the number that they had originally told us we were going to get for state aid, which would have been here, and they would have given us that number in February, as they normally do, of last year, was actually $430,000 less. So we had to appropriate $430,000 of fund balance in order to balance the budget. We did that. There's a resolution on file that the board did actually, and I think in its late July meeting, to accommodate that. That all said, what it really means is if you took that out of the mix here, that 430,000, we'd be looking at closer to a $1.7 million increase above where we normally would have budgeted fund balance. So just keep that in mind, because that's not necessarily, this is an unusual level of fund balance here. Okay. There is no requirement for us in balancing this budget this year to budget anything for maintenance reserves. So it was minimal last year, not needed this year. It's there for us for things during the course of the year if we do need it, but it's a $24,000 decline. The next big ticket change is really in tuition and miscellaneous revenue. The tuition is generally static. We're in here at about $650,000 of this number. The balance of this and the balance of this number here were miscellaneous revenues that we collected for the following things. We generally would have as many as 300 students paying for transportation because they are courtesy bused, if you will. They're not otherwise entitled to transportation. And we would have been seeing a lot of utilization of our facilities at both the high school and the middle school and some at the elementary schools throughout the year on nights and weekends by outside groups who pay us for the use of those spaces for either sports or for business promotion or for other types of activities. And those revenues have obviously in the current operating world dropped off, and we don't have a clear picture of where they are going to be when we return to full instruction next year. We don't know if all these groups are just going to come back at once or not. In order to be conservative, we've anticipated that they're not. We're able to balance the budget at this time without doing that. If we get those revenues, that will be a plus for us, obviously. But we could not anticipate with any certainty what these groups may or may not do. The general tax levy is an increase of 1.77 million, and that is 2%, as you'll see in a subsequent slide. State aid year over year is a $762,000 increase. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in a minute, because while it is nice for us to have that, there are some concerns in the long term that we should put out there with respect to that level of state aid funding. Extraordinary aid funding, we are budgeting and anticipating and hoping will be flat from the state. That comes in separately from the number here of $5.6 million. And we would not expect to see that $1.7 million until sometime in August. That is generally how the state does it. It will require us sometime in the next month or two to make application for extraordinary aid through a rather complex process of data submission. And they meaning the state legislature and the governor, are required to incorporate whatever levels of state aid funding they're going to provide for this year in the budget that they're approving for next year. And that's why we don't get the money until August, because statutorily they have until June 30th normally to approve the budget. Although, as I noted, in this past year, they took an extra 2 months due to the extraordinary circumstances of the pandemic. The State Education Medicaid Initiative is a state mandated program that we are required to participate in. This is the level that the state tells us we must budget for that. They anticipate that we will have a certain number of students who have IEPs who are below a certain income level receiving very specific related or related services, which are OT, PT, and speech, that are therefore billable back under the Medicaid initiative that the state is pursuing. And so there is a very involved process, which I won't belabor for the group here because the impact for our budget is almost negligible in terms of the dollar amounts relative to the size of our budget. The federal grants and aid, as I indicated before, they're almost flat. 356 is what we're anticipating at this point in time as an increase year over year. The largest funding streams here are really two things. The Individuals with Disabilities Act basic and preschool amounts are about $1.25 million, and the other 300,000 or so large piece is the money that we get for Title I funds, and then the remainder is split up over Title II and III funding. Debt levy, as you can see, it's relatively static. The district has spent a great deal of time in terms of trying to maintain a level debt going forward. The bonds and debt the district has as a district are generally scheduled to fully mature and be paid off by the year 2030. There is expected to be, or there was expected to be, a significant increase in the amount of this levy amount in 2022. However, the district recognized this about 4 or 5 years ago, put a plan in place to hopefully retain this as flat going through 2030. And we do have an opportunity to make that happen through a refunding of a tranche or a segment of those bonds that will be up for recall, if you will, under their original issue in 2022. Debt service fund, we zeroed that out. We had $1 last year. We have 0 this year, so you have a net $1 difference. State aid for debt service is roughly $710 less, and there's your total increase of 3,403 in revenue to match the expenses we talked about in slide number 3, if I remember correctly. So what are the major factors in the budget? Current programs and services are sustained, and we'll emphasize that in a few ways in ensuing slides. And it's really important to understand that. I think I'm trying to give some context to that and how we're doing that. Staffing levels remain unchanged from the current year's adopted budget levels. District enrollment, and this is really kind of critical to how we look at the first two pieces, first two items here, continues to decline. State mandated Chapter 44 health benefit programs negatively impacted the district. I mentioned that when I talked about the $1.7 million increase in health benefits. That's an extraordinarily large number compared to prior years' increases year over year. Unionization of facilities services negatively impacted the district. And when I say negatively impacted, in both of these cases, I mean financially. Other than that, I don't know that we could argue that there's a negative impact, but it is a financially negative impact. Sustainability of the state categorical and other state aid is a challenge. I'm going to talk about that. I'm just trying to whet everyone's appetite by kind of alluding to that, by alluding to it again. Major district capital projects continue to proceed. We'll talk about the biggest one that's on our plate for the upcoming summer of 2021, and significant costs related to one-time and recurrent pandemic-related needs have been largely offset by one-time federal grants. This will be a recap of all the things, or most all of the things that the district has done in the past since the inception of the pandemic, the costs associated with them, and with the sources of funds that we've been able to obtain for those so far. So, sustaining programs and services, just generically, programmatically, they're all maintained from this year to next year. The budget supports our ongoing efforts to complete district goals connected to the strategic plan, and key components of the plan, of that strategic plan, include professional development of staff, student competence, safety and security, and communication and collaboration. Expanded opportunities. The budget does provide some expanded opportunities through the following things. The QUEST program for the enrichment of gifted and talented programming. Support services in reading and mathematics. There's an emerging need resulting from the pandemic-related school closure. Required training and advanced placement courses, additional training for our new district readiness assessment initiative, reading assessment initiative. The transition of Ridge High School to a modified rotating drop schedule. This is a big piece. In fact, in the salaries, we have budgeted a significantly different additional component of dollars or complement of dollars to pay for a curriculum revision that is necessitated by going to this rotating drop schedule. A staffing addition of a coordinator of a district mentoring program, the Big Sibling program, which will also support our disengaged and struggling learners. Provision of a summer intervention program for our struggling and/or disengaged students, and our continued efforts to focus on character-related initiatives. So I did talk a little bit about enrollment decline. Since every year the state requires us to do a head count. They call it the application for state school aid to be technical, but it amounts to a head count of of students by grade and by certain other subcategories that the state wishes to collect the data on in order to calculate what state aid theoretically it will give us in accordance with the state aid funding statutes. And as you can see here, the head count as of this past October, which is the most recent actual count we have reported to the state, and which they predicate their budget trending numbers for districts on, and our growth rate or declining growth rate was 4,845 students, a 5.5% decline over the prior year. And the year before that was a 3.2% decline over the prior year, which was a 2.3% decline, and so on. Overall, a decline in actual counts of students from October of 16 to 20 of 673 students. To look at that a little bit differently, you'll see the same enrollment count numbers that I just described, as well as the projected enrollment count for October of 21. And where this number comes from is from the October 2019 demographic study done by the district's demographer, Dr. Richard Kripp. And you will note that it's almost 100 students more than what we had this year. And that's because the actual head count this past October was less, obviously, than what he had anticipated, because he did not foresee some of the, nor could anyone have known to foresee what the impact of the pandemic would be, or that it would even come to be. So we're thinking that, with the advancement of vaccinations and the changes in CDC guidance, that we are hopefully going to be back to what the projected number would be, which even then at 4,934, compared with where we were in the 16-17 budget, a 5-year change is a little over 10.5% decline in enrollment. That's a significant decline in enrollment. During the same time period, what the district spends in salaries and benefits in classrooms has gone up 19.7%. What the district has seen in textbooks and general supplies has stayed the same, even though it declined last year. It's actually up to 477 this year, which is the same level at 4934 number of students that we had when we had 5,518 students in the district. Classroom purchase services are down slightly. This is to $42. It's not the lowest we've been, but it's actually more than when we had 5,400 students. And the only thing I can tell you about that is that these items are budgeted, predicated on the fluctuating needs that the instructional supervisors and curriculum expectations drive for any given cohort of students at the time we do the budget. So they vary from year to year in terms of what they plan or need to purchase in terms of service, and based on the complement of students that we have and the curriculum we're teaching at the time. So total support services are up almost 40.65% over that same period of time. And the total, if you total all these, the per pupil spending went from 12,262. This is really stuff that support and instruction in classroom to 15,055, roughly just under 23% increase. So this is all about, even though we have a declining enrollment, the spend per pupil has continued to increase and therefore sustains the level of program and services. And in some cases, as I noted previously, we've been able to expand those services and opportunities. So I want to talk a little bit now about the impact of state mandated Chapter 44. That was signed into law on July 1st by Governor Murphy as Public Law 2020, Chapter 44. It mandated the creation of 2 new health benefit programs, the New Jersey Educators Health Plan and the Garden State Health Plan, to be implemented January 1 of 2021 and August 1 of 2021, respectively. It requires districts with private insurance or self-insurance, such as our district, which self-insures, to implement equivalent plans. And effective January 1, 2021, some 316 district staff elected the NJEHP plan. This plan eliminated the employee contribution requirements of Chapter 78 and thereby significantly increased the district's share of the cost of health benefits. The estimated increased cost was preliminarily determined to be between $700,000 and $800,000 annually in lost contributions. So if you think back to that original slide in which I indicated the cost of health benefits was going up $1.7 million a year, you can see that 700,000 to 800,000 of that, okay, is attributable to a loss in contributions, which means the district had to appropriate more money because now its share has increased accordingly. Since the state has not released the requirements for the Garden State Health Plan, underwriters cannot estimate what the fiscal impact of that program will be when it comes to us in August of 21. I'm not going to belabor this because I've alluded to it several times. I think the key takeaway here is that our facilities consultant reviewed the proposed union master agreement with the third-party provider, and what it does, and why the local membership of that third-party provider, which by the way would transfer to any third-party provider, as I understand the unionization provisions that would come into the district. What it does in pertinent part is escalate wages above the state of New Jersey already progressive minimum wage rate scales. So you will probably recall, for those of you who read a lot of New Jersey news in particular, that one of the things that was done by the current administration, I think within the first year of its coming in, and they're in their 3rd year now, I believe, was to pass a 4-year phase-in of increase in minimum wage, getting to $15 an hour about this time. What this does is to actually add a premium on top of that, if you will, because in order for a union to get people to vote for it, it needs to offer better than what they can get without the union, and that's what this does. It escalates the wages above the already progressive minimum wage rates, and there we have a significant increase in our operating costs. We've also been advised that it provides a significant increase in health benefit plans for each employee without regard to tiering. We are still reviewing the impacts and how that may or may not impact us directly. State aid. You recall that I said it was nice to receive an additional $762,000, but there was a caveat, a concern. And the question is it sustainable? At the state level, the overall state proposed budget, which has to go through legislative review and approval before it's returned to the governor for final sign-off by June, being proposed by the executive branch to the legislature, was, I think, something like $44 billion, which is roughly a 10% increase in year-over-year spending for that state level of budget. And in review of that data by the Office of Legislative Services, they've noted that 10% of that proposed spending plan is covered by one-shot or non-recurring revenue sources. So the question becomes, with that magnitude of dollars being one time, how and where will this, if at all, impact subsequent years' level of state aid? Because the state aid for education is still roughly more than a third of the entire operating budget of the district, of the state, not of the district. Pandemic-related costs offset by federal funds. We've incurred a significant amount of costs as a result of initiatives that we've pursued to address the pandemic. Sanitizing equipment and screening thermometers. We put sanitizers in every classroom, and the screening thermometers, a significant number of those were distributed early on, $27,000. Refills for soap in dispensers, and I should probably drop down here to say one of the major initiatives we pursued last summer was to upgrade every restroom in the district so that it was hands-free. And we made upgrades also to the nurses' offices to enhance the sanitization processes for the air and other aspects of those office spaces, because obviously we were most concerned about a space where students who might be sick might be concentrated for any period of time. That was $295,000. We put in hands-free paper towel dispensers, soap dispensers, and water faucets. In the long run, they may actually save us some money because they're more economical on how they disperse all of those particular agents, meaning paper, soap, and water. But there is an initial outlay for that and for the supplies. Technology for virtual learning. At this time, we've already procured an additional 1,077 new Chromebooks. And these were driven largely by a big tranche that we purchased for K-5, but that was about 850, and the others are all Chromebooks that various supervisors or buildings have made one-off requests, if you will, of 20 here or 20 there for specific related instructional needs that are driven by the new virtual learning that we've been doing. All right. Personal protective equipment, $129,929. So almost just shy of $1 million at this point. The federal funding sources, lots of acronyms here. I'm not gonna, this presentation will be available on our website within the next 36 hours. So you'll be able to go back and look at those if you like. But we have the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Security Act, CARES Act, $257,299 provided by that. There was a pass-through of similar funds from the county to school districts in the county of that same pot of money of an additional $19,742. There was the Coronavirus Relief Fund, also federal funds, $138,000. FEMA, we anticipate getting $132,541 from. Title I funds, $45,658. This was primarily used to buy some Chromebooks that we had up here, but not, that's a fraction, obviously, of the cost we incurred for Chromebooks. And the balance of it, and I have this in yellow, is the most recent release that we have of federal tranche of funds. This is related to funding that was enacted back in December, a roughly $900+ billion federal aid bill that included additional ESSER II funds. So those funds are actually more than this, but they would be balancing out what we've purchased so far. It's anticipated that those ESSER funds will be roughly another $1 million. But in terms of expenditures to date, we've only spent about 405,000 of those because we've been told that we can apply them to any costs that we've had to date for these types of goods and services that we have not yet reimbursed through some other federal funding. So I think that's some good news in that we've been able to largely cover what is a rather significant outlay for the things that we needed from these federal revenues, because most of these are one-time types of costs, hopefully, and most of these are one-time types of revenues. All right, I won't spend a lot of time on this other than to bring your attention to the fact that year over year, and this is an 11-year history for those who want to go back and look at it at some point, of tax levies in the state, in the district. It's a proposed 2% levy increase year over year. The debt service is down fractionally, and overall, we're looking at 1.899% increase year over year. Renovation and improvement projects. Mr. Markarian, I don't know if you want to talk about these or would you like me to go through these?
You're welcome to handle it, Mr. McLaughlin. If there's any questions, I'll be happy to jump in.
Sure. Okay. So funding source, the district has funded these through a capital reserve. There's no grant in particular for this funding. There's no state grant. There's no federal grant that would cover this. Originally, we were going to undertake this project in June of 2020, but due to the onset of the pandemic, the ability to bid it and actually do the work just became way more complicated. And we were somewhat reluctant to have a large number of outside individuals in our building last June when we were still in the if you will, infancy of this pandemic and still trying to understand what was important to do and not do under those circumstances. That all said, the district did go ahead with the bidding process. We awarded a contract to a contractor for just over $530,000, if I remember correctly, back in December of 2020 for work to begin when on the, I believe the 21st of June is when they will actually begin this project. What's being done? So here's a breakdown. Rooms 400A through D, existing science lab classrooms will be renovated to include sinks that presently do not exist, with all new casework, including base units, countertops, and wall units. Rooms 309, 311, and 313 will be renovated to become 2 classroom spaces. So effectively increasing the size of those classes by taking 3 and combining them into 2. They'll receive all new floor finishes, wall finishes, new ceilings, and new casework as well. Will include work areas throughout with sinks, new base cabinets, countertops, and wall cabinets. So this is kind of an architect's rough layout, if you will, of what the casework and sinks and storage is going to look like in the 6th grade classrooms. Location of where we're going to have outlets. 8th grade, replace casework and pods. This is presumably what the plan would look like. Obviously, up here is where the teacher would be primarily. And oops, I think that's it. We're at the end of the presentation. So I'm going to reduce the size of this just so I can see everyone again a little bit better. Mr. Markarian, do you have comments that you'd like to make, or
Sure.
We take-
I just wanted to thank you for your thorough work, Mr. McLaughlin. And, traditionally, the question comes up as we do these presentations, what is the scenario with respect to staffing? And traditionally, over the last several years, we've taken a look at that issue relative to attrition. And as you noted, some of what we see is a increasing per pupil cost as we try to add services with the attrition and the turnover that we have, whether it be with Spanish instruction or enrichment programs. And we anticipate anything else following that same pattern as we move into the 21-22 school year. And I think we could probably provide a little bit more detail about what we're thinking on that as we get to the May presentation, when we do the public hearing on the budget, and also talk a little bit about what our summer plans are at that time in terms of staffing for summer programs. So thank you again for your time.
Are there questions from the board? I'm just going to stop sharing for a minute so I can see everyone on my screen. I'm sorry, are there questions? No question.
I'm watching heads and looking for hands. I don't see any questions.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. McLaughlin.
Thank you.
Karen, it looked like you were talking, but you're muted.
I think you're muted, Madam President.
I'm so sorry. I thought I had clicked it off, but I guess I did not, or I clicked it off and on again. So I was saying that thank you very much to Mr. McLaughlin. We appreciate your thorough and detailed report. And I think the fact that there weren't any questions probably speaks very highly of that. And so as we move to our next agenda item, it is the superintendent's report. Mr. Markarian.
Thank you, Madam President. I really don't have anything at this time. Definitely we'll be talking at greater length under superintendent's report at the next Board of Ed meeting.
Okay, thank you very much. So that brings us to public comment on agenda items. Mr. Syed, do we have anyone in the waiting room?
We do not have anyone in the waiting room.
Do we have any written public comment on agenda items?
Yeah, we do not have written public comment on agenda items.
Okay. All right. Well, so with that, we will move ahead and wait for those public comment items for the non-agenda section. So next we have approval of minutes. If I could please have a motion. Mrs. White and Ms. Schaefer. Mr. McLaughlin, could we please have a roll call?
Mr. Salmon,
Yes.
Ms. Schaefer,
Yes.
Ms. Beckman,
Yes.
Mrs. Richmond,
Yes.
Mrs. White,
Yes.
Mrs. Korn,
Yes.
Ms. Hira,
Yes.
Mrs. McCune,
Yes.
Mrs. Gray.
Yes.
Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Mr. McLaughlin. Moving on, we have our Finance Committee report. Mr. Salmon?
Finance met on Thursday, March 18th. The first item up for discussion was a review of the Aramark Food Service staffing and personnel matters. Unfortunately, Chris Deach, who is the Aramark Food Service Manager for the district, gave notice to Aramark that he is leaving. That's very unfortunate because he did a great job turning around food service last year. So Yet Aramark has presented 2 candidates to replace Chris to Bill Gerichter, who's at Advocate, our food service and facilities consultant. Mr. Gerichter is interviewing the lead candidate on March 19th, which already happened. The lead candidate comes from corporate services and would be available within 2 to 3 weeks after the offer is made. Chris will stay on until a replacement is found. So thanks to him for his great service to the district and for turning around the food service at Ridge High School. The second item was the food service startup. So the district is currently providing students with free and reduced lunch, which will continue. However, if we're going to start serving lunch or making order ahead or grab and go options at any time this year, Aramark needs 30 days to start up, which is primarily due to getting staff back in the building. This will be challenging because most of these individuals have been collecting unemployment, which was extended by the recent federal American Rescue Plan, and it would only be 1 to 2 months of work at most. Also, if the district does move to full days, however, the committee recommends continuing to provide the free and reduced lunch, asking students to bring lunch to school, and instructing Aramark to make a limited number of lunches for students that come to school without lunch. The second item was related to Aramark facilities and custodial staffing. The district's contract with Aramark calls for 6 lead custodians and 44.5 regular custodians. The district's since July, we've been about 2 to 3 custodians short, which has been the result of quarantine or job turnover. Mr. Gerichter and Mr. McLaughlin have been speaking with Aramark on a weekly basis about this issue. Also, the district's contract pay is below the current market rate. Mr. Gerichter explained, but that will be resolved by the next contract due to the unionization that Mr. McLaughlin referred to. Mr. Gerichter explained that it would be impossible to continue our enhanced cleaning procedures if we open the school for after school and weekend activities because we clean every 2 hours during the day. We've moved some custodians from the evening to the day, so there would not be enough custodial staff after school and on the weekends to continue the every 2 hour cleaning regimen that we do during the day. However, we did, due to the NJSAA rules for extracurricular activities like sports, we've allowed some extracurriculars like the forensics team to have their meeting at school or partially. The next item was the 2021-2022 budget update. Mr. McLaughlin reviewed the budget presentation that he just gave tonight. Mr. McLaughlin also updated the committee on recent legislation in the New Jersey Senate, a bill that allows districts to maintain a surplus of 4%, which is an increase from the previous 2%. Mr. McLaughlin explained that the district could utilize this legislation to budget a surplus above 2%, but that's to be determined. The next item was a facilities update for Ridge High School. So the first sub item was a food service locations at Ridge High School. So when we go to the unit lunch, we will be utilizing other spaces within the building beyond the cafeteria for food service and sale. So Mr. Perrin, who's the Assistant Director of Facilities at Berners at the BOE, met with Dennis Bettler, the code official from Berners Township, to present use of spaces like the atrium and the PAC lobby outside of the cafeteria that could be used for food service and seating for a unit lunch. Mr. Perrin also met with the Department of Health to present the plan. We will have to file a change of use to allow for food service and seating in areas outside the cafeteria and obtain electrical drawings to show how food service stations will be powered. Mr. Bettler and the Department of Health both requested a mock plan before giving final approval. Mr. Perrin is meeting with an engineering firm regarding the electrical plan and with Aramark regarding food service equipment. The second sub item under the facilities update was the Ridge Booster Club pavers project. The BOE previously passed a resolution to allow this project to proceed, which is the installation of engraved pavers on the path behind the wellness center. However, there is a known drainage area in the issue, and Mr. Perrin explained that their area was reviewed again and an unknown pipe beneath the walkway was identified. So there will be more plumbing and engineering work to resolve the piping issue. And if the district ever committed work to resolve the drainage issue, then the pavers would have to be pulled up and then reinstalled. So Mr. McLaughlin and Mr. Mercarian are going to discuss this issue with the Ridge Booster Club to find either another solution or a different timeline for the project. The next item was air ionization systems. Mr. McLaughlin worked with the district's consulting engineers who identified ionization systems that can be retrofitted for many, if not most, of the Airedale HVAC systems in the district. The ionization systems make small particles like COVID-19 attached to larger particles that can be captured by your current air filters. These ionization systems will be paid for by ESSER funds. The last item was the safety grant update. Mr. McLaughlin explained that the state is still waiting for funds to be appropriated, and then the district's grant applications can be processed. As far as the items on the agenda tonight, 1 through 3 are standing items. Number 4 is acceptance of a grant from the Italian Language Center to cover salary costs for the Ridge Italian program. 5 and 6 are student services. 7 is an out-of-district placement. 8 through 11 are student services. 12 is the approval of resolution for out-of-district and intra-district travel monetary limits. And 13 is a resolution approving the 2021-2022 budget. Thank you.
Any questions for Mr.?
Yeah, I have a question.
Okay, I see. Go ahead, Jen.
I just have a quick question, and I had asked this before about the cleaning protocols for, COVID. Now, I know that, so it seems like take a lot of our time and a lot of money, like to do it. Now, I'm just wondering, have these been updated at all? Are there new, since we know more about it, is there new protocols? Is there a way to streamline it? That's all I'm asking. Or is this, and do we see what's the end game for the cleaning protocols in the schools? Because now if it affects the, any after school activities, things like that. So I'm just curious. I don't know.
As far as my understanding, this has been our cleaning protocol that was part of our return to instruction plan that we submitted. So that's been since September that we've been doing this. But there's no prescribed cleaning regimen from anyone other than at least once daily, which is written into the return to instruction document from the Department of Education, Department of Health, that just got updated in February. But that's Rod, Mr. McLaughlin, do you want to add anything to that?
I think the only clarification is, and Nick, you're more of an expert even than I am on this, but that it said, you're correct about once daily, but high contact surfaces were recommended to be done more frequently, which is what we did here. So it's not as if we are cleaning the entire building every 2 hours. We're going through and looking at high contact surfaces, which happen to be, things like doorknobs and railings and stairwells and certain facets of, of what's in a classroom, basically. And I think that was, if I remember correctly, the additional piece that the plan called for, but it was alluded to in, I think, CDC and other guidance as well at some point, because there's so many layers of guidance, it becomes a little bit complicated to remember which one it ensued from. And I think the other part of it really was, the level of comfort that it gave to both staff and students, because there have been from the staff, I know certainly from the administrators in the buildings, there was a great deal of concern about how frequently we were going to be doing this. So that's, while that may not be necessarily, a science-based criteria, it is one that we have to consider as well at this point when we move things. Nick, I don't know if you want to add to that.
Sorry, just want to make sure I wasn't muted there. Yeah, I mean, I think Mr. Salmon is correct in pointing out the road back document in terms of what the Department of Education pointed us to as far as cleaning and disinfecting. One of the things that you find in that document is actually a link, and they jump you to the cleaning guidance that's provided by the CDC for public spaces, workplaces, businesses, schools, and homes. So you kind of have to drill into that to see what they suggest. But they talk about having a plan, implementing a plan, and maintaining and revising the plan. And that was really the requirement from the Department of Education. We had to show what our cleaning schedule was. And so we developed that in collaboration with Mr. Gerichter, who is essentially our facilities consultant when it comes to custodial maintenance and grounds. That plan is supposed to address normal routine cleaning and also specifically disinfecting using EPA approved disinfectants. So basically we had to do that. And I don't know that beyond those guidance documents, there's really a lot more that's available to us. And I have not seen anything in terms of a update, if you will, in any change recommendations with respect to a cleaning schedule. So in terms of, Ms. Korn's question, has there been any particular updates? Not that I've seen. We could try to see if there has been anything new with regard to a cleaning protocol established by the CDC, but I haven't seen anything new of late. Certainly would be happy to take a look at that, but the requirement was to have a plan, and that's exactly what we did. But certainly it doesn't hurt to, go back and revise and review to see if there's any recommendations that might help make things a little bit easier and allow a little bit more flexibility in the time that custodians are available to do general cleaning, since their hours have been shifted so much towards the school day. It does create operational challenges for other activities outside the school day. So it's certainly worth taking a look to see if there's any suggestions in adjusting our cleaning protocols, and we're happy to do that.
And to be clear, I'm not questioning why you're doing it or what. I'm just wondering if it's going to, eventually other information will come out. Maybe we don't have to,
Right.
move people around so much. That's all. I just wanted to see if there was something out there.
Yeah, we haven't seen anything yet, but it certainly warrants something to monitor and revise the plan on a regular basis.
Any other questions for Mr. Salmon? Okay, so we're going to have to go a little backwards because in my excitement to hear the finance report, I neglected to request that we get motions. So I see Mrs. Richmond's hand and I see Mrs. Korn's hand. So we have a motion in a second. And Mr. McLaughlin, could we please have a roll call?
Mr. Salmon,
Yes.
Ms. Schaefer,
Yes.
Ms. Beckman,
Yes.
Mrs. Richmond,
Yes.
Mrs. White,
Yes.
Mrs. Korn,
Yes.
Ms. Hira,
Yes.
Mrs. McCune,
Yes.
Mrs. Gray.
Yes.
Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Mr. McLaughlin. Okay, so our next agenda item is the Personnel Committee report. Mrs. McCune?
The Personnel Committee met on Friday, and I'm still working on the minutes. There was a lot of information. I'll get them out in the next day or two, and then I'll report out next time.
Thank you very much. So can we please have a motion on the personnel items? Mrs. White and Mr. Salmon, and Mr. McLaughlin, can we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Salmon,
Yes.
Ms. Schaefer,
Yes.
Ms. Beckman,
Yes.
Mrs. Richmond,
Yes.
Mrs. White,
Yes.
Mrs. Korn,
Yes.
Ms. Hira,
Yes.
Mrs. McCune,
Yes.
Mrs. Gray.
Yes,
Thank you, Madam President.
thank you. Okay, so our next item is the Policy Committee report. May I have a motion and a second, please? Mrs. Korn and Ms. Schaefer? And then Mrs. Korn, do you have a report for us?
Yes, I do. And so we vote after, right? The report? Not
Yes.
before. Okay. So the policy committee met on March 8th. There's a lot of stuff, so just bear with me. We had discussion regarding the Restart and Recovery Plan that had to do with end of year events. So these events typically include the proms, 5th and 8th grade end of year celebrations, senior breakfast, sports banquets, etc. Dan Regan, he's a representative from our insurance provider, was on hand to answer any questions or concerns regarding our liabilities in allowing and or supporting these types of events on or off school premises during the pandemic state of emergency. Our coverage is secure in both scenarios, which is great news. Events at a restaurant or either off-premise at a restaurant or other off-premise venue would have their own policies and procedures that would be followed. In the case of having an event at one of the schools, Mr. Markarian reached out to the county superintendent for clarification regarding anything at the schools. In the meantime, we can use the sports guidelines as a rule of thumb where we are having parents and other guests is a consideration. Events will be allowed to occur as long as they are in compliance with executive orders and safety protocols. This policy would cover all schools in the district working within the safety parameters. And we also talked about the next selection form, which already went out on March 12th, and I think everyone had heard about that. The parents were asked to affirm their choice of either in-person learning or virtual learning for the upcoming semester. Once the numbers are compiled, the administration will have to review the numbers and plan to accommodate. The schedule is staying as it is now with the goal to move to full day instruction as conditions allow. And then we have we got a policy alert, and there's a big summary, which we have a bunch of policies for first reading. So it's policy 0145, which is board member resignation and removal, which was revised. It was revised to clarify the language around the removal of a board member for missing 3 consecutive board meetings. It identified the meetings as regular scheduled meetings, not any kind of emergency meeting that was missed. For policy 0164.6, which is remote public board meetings during a declared emergency. This is just the policy for holding remote meetings during the declared emergency, which we've been doing for a really long time. So it's kind of like a little behind the times right now. It just was it's a new one. It's a regulation 1642, which is earned sick leave, which was revised to state that 1 hour sick leave is earned for every 30 hours worked. The statute was revised to incorporate some language changes to accommodate the state of emergency declarations. Policy 1643 is the Family Leave Act, which it just incorporated a bunch of other policies into one policy. So it incorporated the policies of 3431 and 4431, which are family leave, and policies 3431 and 4431, which is the New Jersey Family Leave Insurance Program. All into one policy. The major change was an added qualifying event, which would be if there's a state of emergency declared and childcare closes, 6 days sick days can be used in order to stay home and care for children. The job is protected if there are no sick days available. Insurance can be used by the state to cover the days, and also that teachers cannot be discriminated against or held back for using the act if the childcare is not open. Okay, policy 5330.01 is the regulation, the administration of medical cannabis, which is revised. The word marijuana was changed to cannabis. In policy 7425 and regulation 7425, which is lead testing of water in schools. The policy was revived and the regulation is new, and just says the district must test every 3 years starting in the years 2021-22, and they must prove that lead testing is done within 3 years. Policy 7430 and the regulation 7430, which is school safety, they've been abolished and captured in other policies. The next bunch of policies is related to the No Child Left Behind Act, which has become the Every Student Succeeds Act policy, and it's the policy and regulation guides. So the No Child Left Behind was eliminated in 2015, and we had to update policies to reflect the change. The Every Student Succeeds Act is over 300 pages, and the No Child Left Behind requirements need to be replaced with the Every Student Succeeds requirements. The New Jersey Department of Education may provide other policy guidance, but in the absence of that guidance, the updates need to be made. Everything going to be updated to incorporate ESSA. So policy 2415, Every Student Succeeds Act, was revised. Just like I said, putting the general provisions of the Every Student Succeeds Act, revised from the NCLB. Policy 2415.01, academic standards, academic assessments, and accountability was abolished. Policy 2415.02, Title I, fiscal responsibilities, basically explains what it means to supplement, not supplant. So you can't use the money, the Title I money, to replace regular operating funds and then use the funds for something else. The money must be used to add programs. The policy 2415-.03 was highly qualified teachers was abolished. Policy 2415.05, student surveys, analysis, and/or evaluations was revised. Includes privacy provisions must be followed when collecting information about students. It updated the definition of a minor, and social security numbers are not protected information areas, but are protected by New Jersey law. Policy and regulation 2415.20, every student succeeds at complaints, revised. The complaints filed for, these are just, it says that complaints are filed for every student succeeds at, revised from the No Child Left Behind. Policy 4125, employment of support staff members, revised, same requirements as the No Child Left Behind, but changed to ESSA. Policy 6360, political contributions, was revised and removes a provision referencing contracted educational service providers and replaces it with any educational service provider under any federally funded program. Policy 8330, student records, was revised. Minor changes address the information provided to the military, colleges, or employers in a student directory and protecting the student information. And then policy 9713 is recruitment by special interest groups, which was revised. Minor students need parental approval to opt out of information sharing, and parents must be notified annually of the opt-out policy, and recruiters must give schools 45 days notice before coming to recruit at a school. Whew, okay, that's all the first reading, and now our second reading, which I thought first reading. Our second reading is the 2021-2022 revised district calendar. And to remind everyone, the policy language was changed, was amended to include the following: in the event of Rosh Hashanah occurs during the first week of school, the first day of school will not coincide with the first full day of Rosh Hashanah. And for our 2021-22 school year, it's going to be amended to reflect this change. So school is going to start on Wednesday, September 8th, 2021, and the extra snow day in May was removed. And I think that is everything. There you go. Take that all in.
Questions for Jen? I think everyone's just overwhelmed. All right, so we have our motions. So Mr. McLaughlin, could we please have a roll call?
Mr. Salmon,
Yes.
Ms. Schaefer,
Yes.
Ms. Beckman,
Yes.
Mrs. Richmond,
Yes.
Mrs. White,
Yes.
Mrs. Korn,
Yes.
Ms. Hira,
Yes.
Mrs. McCune,
Yes.
Mrs. Gray.
Yes,
Thank you, Madam President.
thank you. So our next item is the curriculum committee report. Ms. White, do we have a report this evening?
Nope, curriculum doesn't meet until the beginning of April. And so
Okay,
I reported out last time.
yes. All right, thank you. So then we will move on to our wellness committee. Do we have a report this evening?
Yes, we do. I'm reporting out on the meeting from the 25th of February. We met and started with us reviewing supports for struggling learners and students. We can't forget the kiddos that we're still dealing with. The team at the time was in the middle of analyzing teacher feedback forms from February in service to identify struggling learners. They were considering whether there were any trends and asking whether we need to put more resources towards some specific area. But if there didn't seem to be anything specifically surprising or things that needed to be noted. Recently, there was a counseling needs assessment administered to help students self-identify. Actually, that was on the 26th of February, but if they needed mental health or counseling support, and the counseling team was acting on responses to those surveys. They had a similar response rate to the survey in the spring that they had to the same survey in the fall. The team is also looking at what depth of counseling services are needed and whether that has changed from the fall to the spring. Under the umbrella of wellness, we talked a little bit about senior privileges. The consideration of late arrival and early dismissal that seniors have had access to in the past is underway. Options are being considered, but the processes are not guaranteed to happen due to building operations and the importance of COVID safety procedures. We also spoke about the graduation gowns. Dr. Lazovic and the committee discussed the various viewpoints and the underlying issues connected to the color of our graduation gowns. The board was open to the discussion and supportive of the process being followed in order to make a decision. Dr. Lazovic was going to meet again with the student government officers. The dates got a little fudged on that. It was supposed to be originally the 26th of February. I think it was a week later. And then the full student government. They will then work toward a decision and communicate to students and families in March, which has already happened. There will then be presentations followed by small group discussions during advisory. We then moved on to discussion about Challenge Success, which is a private organization who analyzes curriculum for school districts and challenges the idea of success from a wellness standpoint. There was recently an NBC News article about this organization, and our administration had attended a professional development group meeting with this group to consider if or how we could use their expertise. There was a sense that the full partnership with them might not be necessary and is very costly, but we might be able to use pieces on an individual basis, such as the management of stress, at less cost and even more impact. We had a counseling program update. The K-12 counseling staff attended a trauma-informed counseling through storytelling workshop, which sounded very interesting. It was presented by the Richard Hall Community Mental Health Center. This same kind of storytelling workshop has been presented to local FEMA groups and many other organizations. So it's not just specific to education, but the storytelling aspect was especially impactful for the elementary level staff. They felt it would be something they could use. At the elementary level, the counselors have concluded their self-awareness module for their social and emotional learning program and are now headed into responsible decision-making. Lunch Bunch and social time programs continue. At WAMS, the community bundle was published on the 25th of February for scheduling. Transition to 6th grade programming was underway and information was being released to parents. Suicide prevention and coping skills unit planning is continuing for the spring. At Ridge, Wellness Wednesdays with the SACs continues. They're providing guided meditation and relaxation techniques to students each Wednesday. And the number of students who attend varies each week. The SAC staff has been exploring the possibility of a virtual mental health fair in May. And school counselor meetings were ongoing with all current 8th through 11th graders for academic planning. I think those are done now, but junior conferences started March 1st. April 7th, coming up, is the deadline for course changes. And there was an update about parent programming as well. The district added 2 more parent events to address wellness for families. The first is Strategies for Coping with Pandemic Success, which was held on February 25th with CASA of Somerset, Hunterdon, and Warren counties. The other upcoming event that was then added was Raising Healthy Children During Very Challenging Times, featuring George Scott of the Center for Counseling Services, held on March 11th. Presentation materials and recordings are available on the district website. And the next meeting of wellness is this Thursday.
Thank you, Ms. Schaefer. Does anyone have any questions for Ms. Schaefer? Okay, I don't see any questions. So then we will move on. Does anyone have any liaison committee reports? None from Jen? I think Jen or Karen are the only ones right now.
No, we didn't have a meeting this month.
And
okay.
Ours isn't until April.
Okay, all right, so none for that either. So then that brings us to public comment on non-agenda items. Mr. Syed, how are we looking?
Looks like we have one person in our waiting room here that I will admit. I see a first name only, so I'll just ask the person to identify themselves and give their address when I admit them. So I will do that now. Sue, I don't know if you can hear us. I do have someone else that just entered the waiting room, so I might put Sue back into the waiting room and we will try the next person. This is, let's see here.
I think Sue's still in here. I hear something. Oh.
Hi, Nella, how are you? Can you hear us? You just mute yourself. Nella, can you hear us? You just need to unmute in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen.
Okay. Sue's still in here. I hear something.
You can hear me now?
She's not in the room.
No, she's listening
Hi,
to
Nella,
the.
how are you?
Hi.
Can you hear us?
I can hear you.
You have to mute your
Okay.
YouTube.
So thank you so much for just listening today, and I appreciate all of the presentations. I really just wanted to ask the Board of Education, actually, Mr. Markarian, it just seems that what I'm trying to understand is how there have been so many times the question of how students are being asked to or how they're handling the academic curriculum with 65% of the time. The amount of pressure that are put on these students in the high school right now just seems like it's been overwhelming. There have been many times that there are tests, 5 different classes on the same day, and it really just piles on to these kids. It doesn't seem like their mental and emotional well-being is really being talked about, being addressed, how they're handling the curriculum, and whether they're able to keep up and whether they're being overwhelmed. I know that there was a self-assessment for their mental and emotional well-being, but it just seems like this keeps getting pushed aside. But yet somehow there was the opportunity to have a discussion and change the gown color for the seniors that are graduating this year when they've already what feels like lost almost 2 years of their high school years. And it's a lot of changes. And it just seems that what's happened here has created a much more divisive environment when we've already had an unbelievably difficult year. These are students. They are looking at how they're going to move on to their next grade, how they're going to move on to college. Is anyone looking honestly at how they're really handling the curriculum, the pressure, the assessment for SATs, ACTs? I really need to have an answer to something like this because it just hasn't been addressed previously. And I know I've asked several times during Board of Education meetings. So thank you.
Ms. Oliveira, I forgot to ask you, can you just give your address for the record?
They're going to move on to their next grade, how they're going to move on to college. Is anyone looking honestly?
Okay. All right, the rest are emails that were submitted. So here we go. The first one is Kalpana Devaney. Dear Superintendent Markarian and members of the BOE, this is she's at 476 Lions Road. I am writing to let you know that the impact that in-person schooling has made on my kindergartner. Prior to the change in January, my daughter was struggling, especially with reading and writing. A lot of this had to do with the lack of consistency that children of this age need. We are now 2 months into 5 half days in person, and for her, amazing teacher, her growth is remarkable, and it has much to do with her own willingness to take risks and her desire to learn. When she was at home with me, there was zero desire to learn or take risks. That only happens in the classroom. The environment matters. The socialization matters. The connection to your teachers and peers matters. School is so much more than sitting at your desk virtually or in person. It's the interactions. It's the learning from each other. It's the hands-on lessons that can only happen when in person. Now, if she could remain in school for a few more hours, I can't help but wonder how much more she could grow and learn. By remaining status quo, you're doing a disservice to all the children that want to learn. The weather is getting warmer. CDC guidelines, which are guidelines and not rules, have loosened up. I don't believe there are any more valid reasons for a shortened school day. The time is now to get our kids back into school full time, not later on this marking period or next year. It's now. Please give my child and every child in the district a full and complete opportunity to learn in school. The next public comment is from Sue Visalo at 14 Oxbow Lane. When I read the email about the survey to get kids back in school, it was obvious it was written in conjunction with the teachers union. I think they were surprised to see a pullback that if too many kids wanted to get back to school, full-time would not be an option. Isn't the goal to get all the kids back to school full-time? That being said, I hope you're aware that there's a movement gaining steam across the country, fund students and not institutions, where parents are given the dollars to send their kids wherever they want. It is currently in the legislature or has passed the legislature in close to 30 states. A senator recently submitted a bill to the US Senate with the same goal. My point being, if the public school systems continue down the path they are now with resisting going back full time and focusing on non-academic curriculum, public schools will be a shell of the current self in a decade. You may think you are safe in a state like New Jersey, but when Maplewood parents are holding sit-ins to get kids back to school, the unions and the schools have overplayed their hand and lost their most ardent supporters. Do the right thing, get the kids back to school and stop focusing on everything but academics, because the tide is changing and not in support for public schools. The next public comment is from Fred Rossi, 127 Galloping Hill Road. Question 1. A while back, a board member asked how many contact trace kids and teachers have become ill and or have tested positive. Do you have these numbers? And if so, does that help make decisions on days of quarantine and criteria of who should get contact traced? Related to question 1, I'm curious, what are the criteria currently being used to determine how many are contact traced once a positive case is revealed? It was the entire class at one point, but I've heard it is more in line with CDC guidelines of 6 feet and 15 minutes of contact. Question 2, are you aware the CDC guidelines are now 3 feet instead of 6 feet? And is the school going to implement those guidelines? If so, when, and if not, why? Comment, if the kids are given the 3 feet, 15-minute rule, they have some control over whether or not they are ever at risk to get traced, assuming the classroom layout affords them space. This should be adopted immediately so kids can feel they won't get kicked out of school and be able to continue their extracurricular activities. Thank you for your consideration. The next public comment is from Megan Fedor. Can we hear what the plan is to get to full days for every student before the end of the year? Every student that wants to attend school in person should be given the opportunity. I know many of the all virtual students in the high school who are desperate to get back to school in person, especially with the new CDC 3 feet guidance. And she's at 26 Victoria Drive. Sherry Nelson at 195 Smoke Rise Road. I was not aware of the graduation gown debate until a few weeks ago. I watched the video that the Ridge principal sent out this week, and I really questioned the timing of this announcement. The timing completely disregards the fact that some female students already had their senior portraits taken with a white cap and gown. If you're going to make a change like this, it is unacceptable to announce it this late in the year after families have spent hundreds of dollars on professional portraits. Offering a choice of green or white this year would be the logical answer to this issue. I noticed how much the word inclusion was used in the discussion about graduation gowns. Inclusion is a buzzword these days, but I wonder if most people really understand what it means. My son is a senior at Ridge. He started out in the district preschool program 14 years ago. He has autism. His experience in this district has been anything but inclusive. In fact, he has been fully segregated as much as humanly possible. Every time the question of inclusion comes up, the district answer has been to keep him separated from his typical peers. Special segregated field days and mini units were created. A segregated special ed after school club at Ridge was created. My son was excluded from field days, mini units, recess, eating lunch in the cafeteria, going to the library, after school clubs, and even spent years having PE class in hallways and cafeterias at multiple schools in this district because he and his classmates were denied access to the gym because it was just too difficult to schedule them time. I think back on the last 14 years, and I can't believe how much time and energy I spent arguing with educational professionals, trying to convince them to allow my son and his disabled peers to be allowed to participate in things like field day, eating lunch in the cafeteria, playing on the playground during recess, going to the library for a story, or to actually have equal access to the gym for PE. Thankfully, I did eventually succeed in those arguments, but it took months and sometimes years to get those changes implemented. Ridge still does not have any inclusive after-school clubs. My son is nonverbal, but he does not have disruptive behaviors. His inclusion from these activities has nothing to do with his ability to participate, but it has everything to do with discrimination against him because he is disabled. I have heard a lot of people throwing around the word inclusion the last few weeks, but there is nothing inclusive about Ridge High School. The colors of our graduation gowns are the least of our problems. Bringing peer mentors into a classroom to help work on social skills is wonderful, but that is not inclusion. You have a welcome to all students and into all of the larger school community activities, events, and programs to actually be considered inclusive. You need to make accommodations for all students with disabilities so they can fully participate like everyone else. The next public comment is from Adrika Shataraj at 6 Wharton Way. I would like to affirm that the district made an important choice with the graduation gowns, and I support the decision on all green gowns to be more inclusive of all students. I believe this decision may have been better received if students had more education about gender. After the presentation, various debates happened among friends and classmates. However, many of the people debating the issue are uninformed about gender. Moving forward, it may be helpful if the school could inform students about the differences between gender and sex. I wholeheartedly support the decision to include students of all genders. I wish students were more informed about gender, though. Miss Oliveira, just for the record, wrote her public comment to follow up that her address is 83 Galloping Hill Road. Thank you. And that is the last public comment on non-agenda items.
Mr. Syed, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Mr. Markarian, is there anything that you want to try to address now?
Sure. So our first speaker, I think was, sounded like she was talking about high school students largely. I know that the Wellness Committee was reporting out on some of the efforts that are underway specifically with high school students and staff members working together to try to identify students that may have some challenges going on with respect to the academics and reach out to them for support. So I know that's been a program that has been put in place of late, and certainly I hope that it is helpful with regard to those kinds of questions. And obviously, we would want any parents that have individual concerns about their child and the stress that they might be experiencing with respect to academics or anything else to reach out to their counselor and let us try to help directly that way as well. We certainly appreciate that there are obviously challenges going on with respect to how kids are handling academics and pressure right now, given the fact that we're not in a typical school year. There was a question about contact tracing, a question with respect to how many of the kids or students that are experiencing contact tracing are also then turning up to be, in fact, positive at some point down the road, and are we keeping track of that statistic? So obviously, from what I've learned in this school year, contact tracing is not a perfect science. It relies on a lot of communication and variables that are not necessarily something that we can control or even discover at every conversation. What people share, what they don't share, what other circumstances people might not think of. When doing contact tracing, the amount of time that somebody may have been in proximity to someone else and how close were they for how long is not a perfect science. And I certainly appreciate the challenge in trying to do that. And I can understand the question of how many folks were identified as close contacts and later turned out to be positive themselves. And the only metric that I can share on that subject is what is posted in the red box on our Go COVID dashboard. So that box is labeled school-based transmissions. And if in fact we believe that someone was identified as a close contact from a school-related activity and then later developed COVID as a result of that close contact, to our best estimate, given the contact tracing that we're able to do, it does get reflected on the data dashboard. Right now, we see a total of 12 of these identified transmissions. And as we've discussed in the past, those are singular cases, not outbreaks, but single individuals where we feel as though they picked up COVID either at a extracurricular activity or sport, or while actually in school for academics. And we see a total of 12 of those individuals. It's actually right now being shown as 6 and 6. So from a metric perspective, that's as accurate as I could share relative to our experience where we've seen that happening. So thankfully, it's not a huge number, but it is 6 in school and 6 extracurricular, according to the data we have to date. A couple folks expressed the sentiment of getting to school, being in person, moving to full-time. What is the plan? So obviously, we just closed the parent selection form that was sent out last week. We closed on Friday at midnight. At the next board meeting, we'll talk about all of that data, how it impacts class size, and what the plan is for the 4th marking period as a function of all the selections that families submitted. I did express in the last couple of SOS Express messages the last couple Fridays that our plan was to go through that at the Board of Education meeting on April 5th and present our recommendations for the 4th marking period at that time. Let's see. There was a couple of comments on the subject of the gowns and inclusion and gender and inclusivity, inclusion, and the idea of being a buzzword. I can certainly appreciate that the recent announcement with respect to gowns for graduation being the same color has sparked some conversation, if you will. Frankly, I think it's a very healthy conversation and conversation that is going to take time to have, but it's something that I think is going to be healthy for our district as we go forward, talking about what all of these different words mean, how to have conversations about them, and how we can be better as a school system for it. So I certainly appreciate those comments. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Markarian. So with that, we are up to board forum. Board members? Anyone? Mrs. Korn.
Yeah, you know, I hate to say something about this, but I have to, because, you know, I watched the video that Russ sent out. I mean, Dr. Lazovich, and it was very touching and wonderful. But then I also had reactions from girls, a lot of them, that were really upset. You know, like, and it's only the color of a gown. It seems like not that big a deal, and it is a big. And the girls who spoke, the students, so moving. And I almost felt like it was kind of one-sided, though. They didn't really get a lot of perspective from, like, and I know they talk about tradition and stuff, but I don't know why there couldn't be a choice where boys and girls can wear whatever color they wanted, and then it makes everyone equal. But I don't know. I don't know when green and white became gender colors. I know it was traditionally that way, but could we change tradition and then give girls a chance who've been waiting 4 years to wear a white gown at graduation, to let them have that chance? And nothing against. I don't want to make someone feel bad who's struggling with gender, because that must be very hard. They have to struggle a lot more. But also, I sort of kind of discounted some other people's feelings. So they have to, someone has to sacrifice, right? And I don't want anyone to have to sacrifice. So I'm not trying to be a jerk about it, because it's a bigger question than that. But I felt a little blindsided because it really came out of nowhere for me, even though I missed the wellness committee meeting that day. So it was kind of like a surprise. And especially in this year, it did feel really like a big surprise. And I was like, oh my gosh. And my daughter came home, she's like, well, it just has to happen, because you don't want to look like a bigot or a jerk. And that's what I'm going to look like. I'm going to allow a lot of hate mail, but I'm not trying to be that way. I'm just trying to say these are kids, and all kids have feelings like this. And sometimes, you know, maybe it should have been more of a discussion. And I don't know, maybe they had a huge discussion at school, but it didn't seem like there was a huge discussion at school. So I'm just putting it out there, and I'm not trying to say what's right or wrong. I'm just trying to say that some people are feeling like they have no voice in it at all. So they can't say anything about it, even if they don't like it, because because of the hate they're going to get. And they're afraid of the hate. And, I think that's sad, that's all. If you can't have an opinion and if your opinion is considered hate, then that's wrong, I think, and I just wanted to put that out there. I'm not fighting anything. I'm just saying sometimes, things are railroaded and other people's opinion they're afraid. And so have someone tell me they're afraid to say how they felt because they were going to get so much hate. It made me feel really sad.
I'm sorry, Ms. Schaefer. Yes.
I'd just like to respond to Jen's comment, just because I think Audrika, who commented, is actually a current student. And I liked what she had to say, which was that she wants more language and more dialogue about this. And that, what Mr. Markarian just said is this is a good chance for us to have some of those dialogues and to help people have conversations that are uncomfortable and, understand how we can have civilized dialogues within the school, helping students as they move forward into college, which they're going to encounter all kinds of new things, and having to understand some of those feelings and work through some things, I think is a great opportunity. And I'm heartened that we're going forward with some of that planning and some of those ideas of conversation and handling tough dialogues. I actually really support the idea of a unified class with one colored gown. But I like Audrika's idea, who's a student, and I appreciate that she spoke up.
I see Ms. McKeown's hand. Go ahead.
Yeah, I agree with what Ms. Schaefer just said in terms of being able to have dialogue and talk about issues. And it's not easy. I mean, look at our country right now. I mean, there's a lot of division. There's a lot of people upset about a lot of things. And I think it's difficult. And I think it's like our responsibility to help the next generation learn how to talk about these things better than a lot of people in our generation are doing, because we're not doing a very good job of it. So I think it is important. And I know it's not easy. And I know that, like everyone's not going to always feel comfortable or be happy with every decision or every conversation. But I think, we have to do it because it's the right thing to do to try to talk about these issues. And I don't want to hear that any kid is feeling, silenced or, like they can't talk or, that is sad. That does make me sad. And so I think we really need to work on this. I think it's important.
Anyone else? Oh, sorry, Jen, I didn't see you.
Okay. I also just wanted to point out, this is not a new topic. And while some of you may not realize this has been discussed for the past few years. Alumni, graduates have brought this up in previous years about wanting this to be addressed. And Dr. Lazovic actually, and Jen, you may not have been at that wellness meeting, but Dr. Lazovic did.
No, I wasn't.
He addressed all of this at the last meeting and all of the different conversations that have taken place with students. We talked about it at curriculum. We talked about it at wellness. It was, alumni, graduates. I know certainly a few years ago when I had a graduate, this had been brought up as something that the kids felt was really important to discuss and to make a change. And I support this. And I think that the video, the students who spoke eloquently. Each one, I think, was very mature in how they presented it. But I also felt that Dr. Lazovic touched upon so many different questions and concerns that parents had. And while I completely understand that there might be some students that are disappointed or not pleased with it, I also think that it has open dialogue. It will continue to open dialogue. And I think Ridge is a tough school to be at. And I think that this is a step in the right direction to making it not so tough a place and opening up dialogues that are uncomfortable. And there can't be winners and losers like that. That's not what it's about. It's about, making it a better place for all students. And if this in some way, shape, or form shifts the needle to forcing kids to look at things, and parents too, and teachers who may not be comfortable talking about some of these things, to be able to do that, I think it's a step in the right direction.
It is when it's a two-way conversation, but sometimes it's not. And people who don't agree, I'm not saying I don't agree. I'm not saying I don't. I'm not saying I think everyone should go ahead. And I'm just saying that people who don't agree with it or thought that maybe felt like that was their, that they didn't have a voice. So I'm just saying that. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. And a conversation is great, but sometimes a conversation is great when it goes both ways and you don't feel like you're gonna be painted. Like I can imagine when people are thinking about me right now, what a jerk I am, what a bigot. I don't care. And I do care. But sometimes you have to hear other stuff that makes you uncomfortable. You know what I mean? Like, so, and I appreciate those kids, my God, getting on there, beautiful. But there's also kids who feel just as strongly the other way, who thought maybe, oh God, I don't know, this is a crappy year, and it must be a crappy year for everyone. So that's just what I'm saying. I'm not saying I'm against it or for. I just think, I don't know, no one should feel like their voice can't be heard. I'm sorry, Karen.
Go ahead, Karen.
Don't be sorry. I support the decision to go to one color, and I really respect Dr. Lazovic's process of talking to everybody and reaching out to people and all the students and staff and parents. He talked to a lot of people about before coming to his decision. I do feel very sad, like Jen, like you said, that there are some kids who felt that they couldn't voice their opinion. I think it's important that we all teach all the kids that their voices can and should be heard. And even if it is a differing opinion or, one of the minority or majority, whichever it ends up falling on, that everyone needs to be respectful and know that not everybody's going to always agree. I mean, that's just really part of life, right? And I'm hoping that the students especially feel that the school is a safe environment to have these discussions, and that we're, really sort of helping guide the discussions, because there's so much going on in the world that is uncomfortable and makes us all feel terrible and sad and depressed and sensitive, and that I just really hope that we're really just being respectful of and knowing and growing up knowing that not everyone's going to agree on everything. That's all.
Anyone else? Ms. Schaefer.
Can I change the subject just a little? I would like to just mention, because I think it was Mrs. Oliveira mentioned the idea that maybe we're not thinking about the students and the struggles this year. And as I reported out from wellness, I mean, the first thing we talk about is struggling learners and struggling students every single wellness committee meeting. Plus we're talking about it in curriculum. Plus we're talking about it probably every place, but maybe not finance. I don't know if you guys talk about it, but Molly, but I just want to assure parents, this is like one of our highest priorities, is talking about our students and making sure that they're going to be successful. That's our goal.
I'm glad you mentioned that, Ms. Schaefer. I was thinking the very same thing when, Ms. Oliveira was making her comments. I think that it's been the subject not only of committee meeting discussions, but other discussions that have gone on with board members, maybe in, conversations with members of the public or what have you, and certainly in countless conversations and meetings that the administration and the staff have been having that we are not even a part of. Anybody else? Ms. Beckman.
Yeah, just to add on that, I was at the wellness meeting and I've been to several of them. But it's a multi-pronged approach, this wellness, right? And I know she was talking about, or we were talking about the self-assessments, right? But it's not just self-assessments. It's the teachers looking out at the kids if they're missing a day, or if they're not speaking, or if they look sad on the Zoom. It's counselors meeting with their students. It's parents reaching out to the board or their teachers. So it's a multi-pronged approach to really try to help kids that need help and try to find them and not let them fall through the cracks. We all care.
That's for sure. So anyone else on any other topics? I do have one, but I don't want to cut anyone short who has anything on their mind. So we discussed this evening for the public's benefit, this is about return to in-person Board of Education meetings. So as we promised a couple of months ago at the second meeting of the month, we revisit the question of when we will return to in-person meetings. And we did so again today in our executive session. And the board has decided that we will return. Our first in-person meeting will be May 24th. We looked at May, but the public hearing on the budget is May 3rd, and Mr. McLaughlin will be giving a lengthy presentation, and he will be required to wear a mask, and one that it will be difficult for, we feel, for the public to really clearly hear what he's sharing, and it's important. It's an important meeting. So with that in mind, we've decided to move to that second meeting in May, which is May 24th. More information to come, right, Mr. Markarian, on how that's all going to work? Anyone want to chime in?
We'll make it work.
I'm sure we will. Okay, well, if no one, I'm seeing thumbs up, thanks. If no one has anything else for board forum, then I'm looking for a motion in a second to adjourn this meeting. Mr. Salmon and Ms. Beckman, all in favor?
Aye. Tim,
All in
909, just saying.
I know, pretty good.
I told you it's elusive. It's elusive. You've heard about it, but nobody's ever actually seen it.
But
Close.
we also
but-
couldn't get one. We couldn't get one presentation in, so that kind of like.
Should have been 9:30. Sorry about that.
It's all good. All right, everybody, see you next time.